Hi guys, we are starting episode 4 with hopefully the worst over for at least the short term. So for today's episode, I'm hoping we can finally continue on with the actual natural progression of the game with things like automation and logistics, and even an improved furnace setup, which I think is going to be the main priority of today's episode. I already have some placeholders over here for the smelting section, so I'm thinking we can have one of these each, continue upwards for several tiles for the copper, iron, and then eventually steel. But of course, for now, I think we have to start by ripping this stuff up because I like to start out with kind of a blank slate so I know kind of where to divvy up everything, and it's a little bit more organized. So I'm going to start with that. Alright, blank slate essentially accomplished in the farming area for the ore. We'll start placing down miners in just a second, but before we get to that, I want to actually start automating one of the very few things I actually can at the moment, and that would be automation of the stone furnaces. And stone furnaces just take stone, so it's one of the easiest things to automate, especially since I have a nice supply of stone coming in right here, and this is essentially the only area I have for automation at the moment. But it is better than nothing. So we're going to reorganize this a little bit. I think I need to change that electrical pole. But we should be able to get it to fit in this general area over here with a shared box, I think. So we'll do inserters here, and then we'll do a shared box for the products. And one way to divvy up the products so it's evenly distributed in a shared chest like this is to place a little placeholder here. So let's see, I've got furnaces in my pocket, so I'm going to place 2 there, and then we have the walls that I'm going to place back here as well. And that way we can guarantee that we at least get 2 full stacks worth of the furnaces that take up this shared spot without actually going over the maximum that we want. So let's place the recipe now for the stone furnaces, and then let's give power back to these guys. And then what are we missing? Oh, there we go. I need to switch out the inserter. That took me a minute, but now it should start working hopefully here in just a minute. We'll start getting some better automation of stone furnaces, which is something I definitely want kind of working in the background while we work on getting our miner setup going for these 3 resources. So one thing I am worried about is because these all kind of overlap on each other, I know I'm going to be getting a mixture of my ore products onto the same belt. One way we can avoid that is either by just making sure we don't place the miners on areas that overlap between the resources. Like this section here would get a mixture of copper and iron, as you can see with the expected resources section over to the right hand side. But what I'm going to do, which is a little bit smarter now with I think a feature that was introduced in 0.16, is to use the filter splitters. So I actually haven't used them a whole lot, but this is definitely a perfect time to use them. So at this point, we just have to start divvying up the products, or the miners actually. And I think I'm going to do a weird spacing this time around just to allow for my electrical poles. Normally I put them in the back, but I'm going to do an every 2 miners type of configuration. That way I can put the poles here down the middle and then extend the poles either top or bottom as needed at that point. I did craft a bunch of belts by hand already just to prepare for this, so hopefully we'll have enough to kind of get us started. And then I even crafted a couple splitters and inserters and things like that as well. So one disadvantage to this belt line here is that it's going to be getting a mixture of technically iron and copper to the bottom portion of the belt, and then it might get a mixture of, oh, actually maybe not. It looks like we just missed getting coal. So that conveniently worked out actually. So never mind, scratch that. We're just going to be getting a mixture of iron and copper onto this entire belt line. The miners in this next row, though, are going to be getting a mixture of coal and iron. But that's okay. That is easier to organize than having a mixture of 3 different products on the one line, although we technically could figure a way of doing some sort of trick around it with the filter splitters, but this will actually help and make our lives a little bit easier. So waiting for a couple more miners to get built, but we can add in the belt lines. And just a minute ago, you can hear the turrets going off. This has killed 37 biters at this point, this one 15, so there's definitely still coming. We'll definitely have to keep track of that and make sure we have plenty of ammo in those turrets. But hopefully I don't have too much pollution going on at the moment since my factory is almost practically turned off. In fact, there's my ball of pollution there. It's not nearly as bad as it was last episode. But let's get rid of that and keep going. So the hard part, I think, it won't just be an issue of using the filter and splitters. That would be the easy part. But the hard part will be how do we divvy up the lanes where they need to go? Because we'll definitely want even distribution. So this first column we can devote maybe towards copper. And then the middle one we can do iron. And then the left one we can do iron and or steel eventually. So I probably want 2 lanes worth of each product, although I don't know that I will get 2 full belts worth. So let's maybe just keep it 1 lane for output coming from the actual farming area, and then we can split it off from there as needed. So this one will have iron, and we'll join that up with the ghosted in belt line that I have over here. Oh, sorry, this one I said would be copper, so let's remember that. So copper there. And we can use a couple underground belts just to get around it here. So like that. And we'll definitely want to add a splitter. So this will come in handy. This will be splitting off the copper to only go into this lane here, which means we need to change the filter side to this side. So again, that is copper. That means the iron will be coming actually here. I'm just trying to think of how to join this stuff. Actually, let's do something like that. There we go. That way the iron that comes from this row gets evenly placed onto the belt over here. So this will be iron. And then as for the coal, we already know that coal will also be coming onto this line, and then we can join it up here as well. So we'll need a coal filter on this one, and we'll also change this to the right hand side too. So that means basically iron should be coming on these lines without the filter on it. We'll continue that way. And then that means the coal line will be on the outside, and then we just need to figure out a way to also distribute it over here to the smelter lines. I guess let's start with the copper though, since we need to worry about getting the copper divvied up. And I definitely want to make sure I have enough clearance for the cliffs over here. So let's see. Something like that. That way I have a little bit of extra room if needed. You always want to prepare for extra room. So this will be the iron line going here. In fact, maybe right off the bat, I do want to have at least 2 iron lines, because for my steel build, which I'll eventually have, I may want to just do like as much direct insertion as possible for the steel. Whoops, let's place that one more tile down. There we go. So already thinking ahead for steel. So this will be steel and or early game, like really, really early game iron. This will also be iron here. And then this one will be the copper. There we go. I knew something was a little off about that. All right, so now the trick is just how do we get the coal divvied up onto these lines too? Let's see. This, like we said, it will be the coal line. It's going to have to divvy up several different ways to get onto everything. And a couple of you might be asking, like, why don't I just use a blueprint or something like that? Because I know a lot of us tend to have blueprints that we use right off the bat, even for early game type of things. But I try to avoid doing stuff like that because I like the challenge of basically starting fresh with new builds and new scenarios every time I play. Otherwise, it just feels like I'm playing the same game over and over again. Let's see here. So maybe what I can do. Gosh, I need to think this through for the coal. Where did my splitter... Oh, I guess I'm out of the splitters. Okay, let's craft a couple more of the splitters. But we're definitely going to have to divvy up the coal at least 3 times. So, maybe it would be easier to divvy it up so that we split the coal before the copper splits. In fact, I think that would be easier. So to do that, let's buy ourselves a little bit more room. I'm glad I gave us the extra room. And there we go. So that should be problem solved for copper. And it'll make more sense in just a minute once we actually get power poles to the miners that we placed down. And you'll see in just a minute how that looks. But this might look a little confusing until then. Unfortunately, it's not just as easy as having copper figured out. We still have to divvy up the coal going into 2 columns worth of iron and then the iron for the steel as well. But I think just to make it almost easier on my brain, it would be easier not to just imagine the products, but it would actually be beneficial to have actual products on the belt line. So let's go ahead and connect up power now. And we're just going to continue this along until we get back up to steam. Or actually, we could connect it up right here, I suppose. That is even better. And then let's get a couple lamps going. It is just way too dark right here. That is much better. And look, we already have 2 full stacks of the furnaces, which is great. I'm going to do the trick again so that we have 1 furnace on both sides here. So we have 2 full stacks worth of furnaces to build up over time. And let's add some more light over here. So now you guys can actually see what we're doing. Let's fill in a couple of these other things now that we have some more furnaces on us. So this will be, again, the starter smelters for our 3 main products right off the bat. This, unfortunately, isn't a very good setup for like thinking of steel smelters or electric furnaces in the future, but I'm leaving enough room here where I could expand out, like get rid of these, and then make more room for upgraded furnaces in the future if we want to. But I don't want to think that far ahead quite yet. So let's just get the basics down. I tend to sometimes get a little too far ahead of myself, and that's something I want to avoid for now. So let's do power. Actually, let's do... There. And I guess we'll do something like that. So this lane here in the middle will be for the products that get spit out of the furnaces. So this one here should be copper plate. And then let's continue the electric poles all the way to the miners here and make sure that the filter splitters and the miners and everything is working like I would hope it should at this point. And let's make a couple more miners while we're here too, just to passively get going. But one thing, like I said, we're looking for is to make sure that the ore gets distributed onto the belts properly. So iron is good to go, copper is good to go. We're not getting any unwanted mixture past the splitters. So let's start reconnecting a couple more poles here. And it looks like something's not connected properly. Oh, here it is. This needs to go over a tile. There we go. Now we're going to be getting a little bit more products going on the belt lines. Awesome, and let's add a light for good measure. There we go. We'll add more over here in just a minute, but this gives a better idea of it running properly, at least between the copper and the iron. But let's double check now when we start getting coal and iron on the same belts, which hopefully work properly. I think it should. Whoops, and we need one more power pole there and there. Oh, and there. Awesome. So that's working out nicely. We'll of course add more miners as we're able to, but it looks like this is working exactly as I would hope. So that's awesome. We're getting a little bit of coal coming in, so that will have to be fixed pretty much as soon as possible. But you can see the concept is at least one that works. So let's figure out now, we need to get, of course, the coal still divvied up onto this line. And one thing I shouldn't have done is connect it quite yet with the iron over here, because we'll only want half of the lane for each side with iron ore instead of the entire lane. But let me help myself out, get rid of my excess coal in my inventory and products that I don't need. So we need to divvy up the coal yet again. Best way to do that. This is always the hard part for me. Let's switch this up a little bit here. And then I have room for a splitter there. I know this is getting really messy as we go on, but it is time to embrace the spaghetti. Just let it happen for early game. And then we can further add more splitters as we go on to this column over here as well. I know this is obviously not the most efficient way of doing it, and one problem this will have is it's not going to get even distribution. But that's okay. So we need to split here. Oh, actually I said I was going to, what was I going to do? We can actually join this up a little bit earlier. There we go. And then we can do another splitter. And then we just have to worry about splitting off the coal. One more time. Hold on. I just want to redo this real quick. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And then this will continue along. Here we go. All right, it's messy, but technically this should work once we actually have more production of our resources, and of course once we have power. So let me keep filling in some of the essentials, and then we'll turn it on and then make sure everything works at that point. All right guys, well here's the finished product for the very, very early game smelter setup, but it is much better than where we started at the episode, and now I have these lanes for the products that are going to be able to be played with for next episode, for episode 5. Also to show you guys how the miner setup ended up looking with its kind of mostly finished state. Of course, I still have to add a couple more here and there, but you can see that we do get an even mixture almost of products on the lanes, but they do get distributed to the proper lanes where they need to go. So with that, I think I'm pretty happy with as much progress as I was able to get accomplished for this episode, so we're gonna go ahead and end it here. And then by next episode, we'll be able to play with more automation and logistics.